Good day. We have a special guest that I'd like to introduce you, the television audience, to, Dr. J. Michael Stebbins, who is a senior fellow of the Woodstock Theological Center at Georgetown University. Michael got his doctorate in theology at Boston College in 1991, and in fact I have a copy of his dissertation published in book format, The Divine Initiative, Grace, World Order, and Human Freedom in the Early Writings of Bernard Lonergan. My own copy I wanted to show you. Now, Michael, what is the Woodstock Theological Center where you are a senior fellow?
It's essentially a kind of think tank, a place where we do theological reflection on social and public policy issues. Mm-hmm. It was established by the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, mm-hmm. Specifically the Maryland and New York provinces of the Society of Jesus, right. In 1974, for that purpose of providing theological reflection. The name Woodstock has a long history to it. It was originally a theological college run by the Jesuits in Maryland.
Right, they're old Theologate.
Near Woodstock, Maryland, yeah. Correct. When it closed down, eventually what happened was that the library from the college came to Georgetown, and it right. kind of became the focal point around which to build this think tank, the right. Woodstock Theological Center.
Right. How many of you work there?
There are 9 senior fellows.
Okay. And are some Jesuit and some lay?
Mostly Jesuits. I'm a layman.
Okay.
There is one other lay senior fellow. There are also 2 priests who are diocesan priests on the staff there.
Okay. And Mike, what kind of work have you gone into working there?
I have primary responsibility for something called the Arupe program in social ethics for business, okay. which is a program whose purpose is to formulate an approach not only to business ethics, but also to spiritual concerns for managers and executives.
Right.
A kind of integrated approach for helping believers think about what it means to be in business, how their faith ought to affect the way they do right. their work, and so on.
Well, when you think of it, there's so much workaholism in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And there are moral issues to be dealt with in the workplace.
Yeah, that's correct. Of all sorts, from the microcosmic to the macrocosmic.
Right.
So we try to get people to think about the whole range of issues. People in business have different ranges of responsibility.
Right.
And depending on who it is we're talking to, it could be a mid-level manager, it could be a CEO.
Right.
We're trying to get people to focus on those aspects of their workplace that they're able to influence.
Right.
And to think about how their religious values and ethical values can be brought to bear in an effective way right. In those settings.
How did you sort of get into it initially, Mike? Was it their idea that you work on this, or?
Yes, it was. I was trained as a theologian, mm-hmm. and so the connection with business isn't immediately obvious. What happened was I was teaching at a Jesuit university in Spokane, Washington, mm-hmm. Gonzaga University, and one day I got a phone call from the director of the Woodstock Center, mm-hmm. Father Jim Connor. They were looking for someone who could help them think about what theological reflection is. What does it mean to think about social problems or public policy issues right. in the light of religious faith?
Right.
It turns out to be a fairly complicated problem.
Sure.
And the people at Woodstock had decided that the resource that would help them most to do that was the theological method of a theologian named Bernard Lonergan.
Right. Oh, yes, I've heard of him.
And it turned out that that was someone I knew something about. I know something about Bernard Lonergan and his work.
Right.
I'm fairly familiar with his theological method.
Right.
They had done some asking around to see who might be available. They came upon me, and I ended up coming back to Woodstock eventually, not only to help them in general to think about theological reflection, but also to try to put it into practice in a particular program, the Arupe program.
Right. Now, in this work, have you been sort of tempted to go into Lonergan's economic theory to help you out with the ethics side?
I have, but at this point, I haven't been able to do that in any sort of systematic way.
Right.
Although Lonergan was a theologian, he was very concerned about trying to use theology and trying to help. Well, what he wanted to do was to make it possible for people of faith to change the world in
right.
ways that are good,
right.
to try to bring about human progress.
Right.
And in thinking about those kinds of issues, he ended up doing some work in economics,
right.
as you're familiar with.
Sure.
And it's very technical work.
Right.
So in order to apply it to the kinds of situations that I'm dealing with, where I'm talking to managers and executives in business,
right.
there's a lot that has to be done to bring all that technical work down to a kind of
yes.
common sense, readily applicable level, and that hasn't been done yet.
That's a major problem, a major difficulty.
Right.
Because you can't jump from economic theory immediately into praxis.
That's correct.
It requires mediation.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to sum up what it is I'm doing at Woodstock, you might say that in kind of overall terms, terms that are bigger than just what I'm doing in my program, we're trying to find ways of making available to people what Lonergan discovered about human nature,
right.
about the human spirit, about human communities,
right.
and the way they function,
right.
about what brings about progress in human history and what
right.
causes decline.
Right.
We're trying to take that work, which was very seminal,
right.
which if you read it in its original, in the works that he wrote,
right.
laying it all out is quite difficult.
Right.
But because we're convinced it's true and unparalleled in terms of its analysis and in terms of its applicability, we're trying to find ways of making it available to people
right.
in concrete contexts.
Sure.
So